Well, welcome everybody coming in. I hope everyone's having a wonderful day. Today we're going to address the topic that has puzzled and motivated many people. The notion of knowing your why. It's an exploration of the basic factors that influence us in our inner motivations, the very core that drives us. Some claim, however, that the relentless search for the why might prevent us from acting quickly. Well, we'll examine three parts of this argument in depth today. Knowing the fundamental significance of your why and the first step. Then we consider the possible dangers of excessive reflection. And finally, how we strike a balance. How do we make sure that our why leads us without imprisoning us? Joining me today to navigate this topic is Mr. Luke Dillon. He's a certified WHY.os practitioner and senior business coach. He's based in London, England, and Johannesburg, South Africa. So let's get started. Morning, Luke.
Morning, Andrew. Good to be here. Hello, everybody, and looking forward to the discussion.
Cool. So where in the world are you today, Luke?
I'm in London today, Andrew, here for Christmas. So we'll be London-based in the Northern Hemisphere for the next 4 weeks.
Awesome, fantastic. All right, so let's start with the importance of why. So the why is an idea of knowing your why, and this is really in demand at the moment. Let me restart that. Let's start by going straight into the heart of the matter. Why is the idea of knowing your why so in demand? What makes it so crucial in the component of motivation? So my question to you today, Luke, is how has understanding your personal why transformed your perspective on success and failure?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Great question. I think for me, understanding my why and really enabled me to look at where I hadn't been successful, whether that was in a business enterprise or environment, or whether it was in a collaboration, to look at it and say, okay, well, if I understand what my drivers are, as I do now, having been through the WHY.os discovery, to be able to look at that and say, okay, now I do understand why that didn't work or why this did work. And my why is better way. So I'm able to now look at it and say, okay, well, that was the frustration that led to that partnership not working, or, that's what enabled me to really add value to that team and helped us achieve the next level. So it's been incredibly insightful and valuable to me to help me understand where I add value, how I add value to a team, and to help me understand why I went wrong in certain situations or businesses.
Fantastic. So how does this align or deviate from societal definition of success?
I think it aligns with it, Andrew. I think, where it aligns is if you look at, and I think success is, that's a moving target, isn't it? If you ask a boomer what success is and you ask a millennial what success is, you're going to get two very different answers. So, I think understanding your why will help you look at where you can succeed and where you can be successful. So, society's definition of success does come into play to some extent, but when you understand how you can achieve success as to how you perceive it, and knowing what your why is and what's going to give you that feeling of success or put you into a position where you can succeed, I think that's where the alignment lies.
So just building on that, we all talk about societal norms, right? Everybody conforming.
Yeah.
But on the why, it really talks about you as an individual. So understanding individuality, is this a positive or a negative?
I think understanding your own drivers and your own why is hugely beneficial. And if you haven't been through an exercise like that, it is life-changing, because you suddenly get that understanding or that self-knowing, that gives you an opportunity to smile really so often when you look back at things and decisions you made, and suddenly that understanding is there. So I think that's critical at an individual level, because I think that builds confidence. Because instead of now your introspection going down this rabbit hole of why, and no real answers, once you've used the tool and that understanding's there, I think, Andrew, it just, they're the answers there. And so from a group environment, I think where it's really positive is that it helps us understand one another, and allows you to align even though you're different. And I think that's the beauty of knowing, and the wonder of the tool.
Yeah, I think people forget that we're all humans. All humans are different, and that's what makes it so much fun, right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Let's go to another question. What does knowing your why offer a sustainable source of motivation, especially in difficult times?
That's a big question. I think in difficult times, Andrew, I think any self-understanding eradicates fear to some extent, because you're able to then look at it and say, okay, I can understand the perturbation, the worry, the stress in this immediate time linked to whatever it is, a change in whether it's a change in normal behavior of society due to something like COVID, whether it's a change in location for your work or location for your home. You're able to take that stress and understand, then if you plug it into the matrix of your why, to say, okay, well, here's the challenge for me, and here's why I'm experiencing these feelings, because these are the things that drive me. So if I can understand that, I think you can compartmentalize it, and you'll be able to move through, that stressful time. And I mean, that's in all of our lives, and that's it's cyclical, isn't it? So I think
Yeah.
it's definitely gives one comfort in those times.
Awesome. So you do a lot of work with leaders and organizations. So let's tap into that for a moment. So how can organizations or leaders tap into this concept of fostering motivation at a group level and using why?
I think as a tool, Andrew, I haven't come across anything else that's more powerful, to be honest. I work a lot with DISC, as you know, and I think as a combination, they're incredible. But WHY.os is just, I mean, it's my tool of choice at the moment for helping teams develop. And when you look at a business and you say, well, what is a business? A business is a group of people carrying out tasks. And as a business leader, you've got various teams or various pillars, whatever you want to call them, divisions, but essentially you've got teams of people. Now, if that team of people do not understand one another or do not know how to communicate with one another, then, I mean, you're on the back foot the whole time, because instead of being a leader and aligning people behind a goal and motivating them and showing them a vision, you become an HR practitioner trying to deal with issues between your team players. So I've seen teams that have worked together for a decade where there's been a problem between two team members, since time began, and you take a team like that, you put them through WHY.os, and after a 2-day offsite, you've got two people who suddenly not only have an understanding of one another, but now sort of respect and like one another and are talking to each other like friends. I mean, it's incredible to see that. And once you've got an aligned team and people understand each other, and what I love about the tool, Andrew, it opens the space for people to be vulnerable and to start talking. And when there's vulnerability in a team, that's when trust starts to develop. And once you've got trust, I mean, that's the building base, whether you've been through Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions or anything like that. Trust is your building block. And once you've addressed that, then you can move a team through all the other processes to get a team really high performing. Getting them aligned, and this perception that people are aligned, or this play environment so many teams work in, where everyone's just trying to get along, but they don't really. And there isn't true alignment. And as a result, there's no accountability. So there's no results. So as a leader, I don't think there's an easier, quicker tool to use to start building a powerful team.
Fantastic. Let me ask you another question. I said earlier that you're based in London and South Africa. One of the questions I get asked all the time is, um, so using tools, using techniques, and the why discovery in particular, does that change based upon locations, or is it different for people in South Africa versus in London or the US? What's your thoughts on that?
No, and I don't think it changes anyway. The more you speak to business owners all over the world, the more you realize that at the end of the day, the primary challenge, when you take the economy and those things out of the way or off the table, is team. And I speak to directors and CEOs and MDs, both in the UK and in South Africa, and it's the same challenge. I can't get the right people. There's a shortage of talent, and teams aren't performing. And often it's not a talent issue, it's an alignment issue. And
Mhm.
it's exactly the same when I deal with guys here in London, and I go back to South Africa, be it Johannesburg, Durban, Cape Town. When you sit and work with those teams, you quickly realize that it's just an alignment issue, and it's not necessarily talent. But when people feel misunderstood or undervalued or unheard, they don't
Mhm.
perform. So the minute you
Mm.
bring a tool like this and you understand that you've got a person with a why of challenge in the environment, instead of everyone looking at him and saying, well, Andrew or Luke's just difficult. It isn't. That's his why. He's there to challenge. And when you look at great teams, I mean, you'd love a why of challenge on your team. So I don't think it changes anywhere, Andrew. I think it's the same globally. Great teams win. So how do you build a great team?
Awesome. Fantastic. Some great insights there. Thank you, Luke. All right, as we said, let's get into earlier. Let's look at some of the risks of why. So even though reflection can be enlightening, can we sometimes find ourselves caught up in it, right? Doing that all self-reflection, self-reflection. Um, and does the pursuit of knowledge sometimes limit our perspective? So let's explore this a little further, if we may. So, Luke, critics can argue that focusing too much on your why can lead to self-centeredness or a navel gazing or things like that. So, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we have critics, or I mean, maybe they just have a why of challenge, Andrew. Uh, I think there's huge value in that. I mean, you want anything challenged. So I enjoy the view of critics, whether it's regarding this tool or in any other space. I think they add value to society. That said, I don't think there's enough navel gazing happening nowadays. Everywhere I go
Mm.
and travel, whether it be in South Africa or in the UK, people are connected to electronic devices. They can't be in a different, separated from their electronic device. It follows them from room to room to room at home. I've got teenagers. I look at people on public transports in the UK, in South Africa, doctors' waiting rooms, wherever you go, people are just reading, and no one's sitting introspecting. I don't think there's nearly enough of that done. So I think understanding your why. I haven't come across an environment where people have been taken through that process, and a week or a month later, I'm getting questions that tell me that there's radical introspection or that it's become a problem for a team. If anything, I see the polar opposite, Andrew. We'll go
Yeah,
and do an offsite, and I'm sure you experience the same in Texas. You take people through that deep level of discovery, and there is that intense introspection and understanding that comes from the tool, and people absolutely love it. I've yet to come across someone who's been through that discovery and hasn't, come to me and said, "Luke, I mean, this is unbelievable. It was written for me, about me. Talks to me." That they then don't have a short period maybe of deep introspection. But the problem is afterwards, 2 weeks later, everyone's back in their rut and no
mm.
one's thinking about those things. So I definitely I haven't come across that risk myself. And I'd love to discuss it with other certified coaches and see if they have. But I think you need to revisit it on a regular basis to make sure that actually there is some navel gazing and people are thinking about it more.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that you and I do with all of our clients is we actually bring them back to that every time we engage with them, right? So we are working with leaders that are facing challenges everywhere, and we're constantly having conversations about challenges. And when we wind it back to what's causing the challenge or causing the issue, a lot of the time we find that it's because they're not focused on their why, right? And they're not playing to their strengths.
Yeah,
They're playing to their weaknesses, right?
correct.
All right, so let's keep going on this. So how can we ensure that the pursuit of understanding their why doesn't turn into an insular exercise?
I suppose doing follow up reading and the like, Andrew, would lead to that. I mean, as a coach or as a certified practitioner of WHY.os, you would guide your clients in that space. I just haven't come across it, so it's a difficult question to answer, really. Of people becoming insular in that regard. I think any level of deeper self understanding is so valuable that I haven't come across it in an environment where it's led to negative results. You know what I mean? Whether that be in a work environment, I'm sure you've dealt with it. You take people at a corporate environment, you take a team of 7 people, 8, 9 people, whatever it is, and you take them through a WHY.os discovery, and you give them that opportunity during that offsite to have half an hour, 45 minutes to sit and think without an electronic device to distract them. And they come back, and so often, how often have you had it where I think I now understand my spouse a little bit better, or I want my wife to do this, or I want my kids to do this, or my brother, my sister, and so I just don't see that as a risk, Andrew. I have yet to encounter it.
Yeah, I'm with you, Luke. I mean, the ones that we've done so far, I get the same experience, right? I want more. It's not I want less, right? And it's not more. It's people want to understand. People need to understand. And I think I go back to your example with electronics today. So many people have been told who they are. They have not figured out who they are themselves. Why do they do what they do? And how do they do it and what do they deliver? They've been told. And when people get informed as they go through the discovery of their why for the first time, they understand themselves at the deepest level, right? And as you said, teams start to understand each other at the deepest level. So I'm with you. I don't think there's a risk to doing this, or people sat there and being, Plato, and sat there for days and days and days trying to figure out it's literally given to you on a plate, and it's here's who you are. Now the risk is how do you not take it forward, right?
Definitely. I think, Andrew, like anything in life, if you're going to take that as a snapshot and your sole definition of who you are suddenly, yes, then there's potentially a risk. But if you're working with a recognized coach, they're going to put you into a position to understand this is a tool to help to give you greater understanding. It's not suddenly a definition of who or what you are. And I think that's the beauty of the tool is it's when you look at it's not saying, okay, here's one word that suddenly describes Andrew. It's saying here's given on your answers provided to the tool. Here's why you do what you do. Here's how you do it. And here's what you bring. And, when you look at that, what you bring, and you take a team through that process, and suddenly you've got, let's call him Steve in the corner, and you say, Steve's got a what of challenge, you've got a room of people laughing suddenly because they understand why at the end of every meeting, Steve says, wait, I've got a few questions, please, and when people recognize that and they understand it, it's like, okay, no, that's actually great. And you can say to a team, so what's good about it? When has Steve raised a question like that and challenged you, and that you've actually all sat back and thought, okay, well, we didn't think of that. Great, good challenge. So who wants Steve on their team? And people who, yesterday morning at tea time were saying, yeah, that's probably the one guy we would maybe kick off the team, or all saying, yeah, we need Steve. So So no, I don't think there's any risk in that space. I think people understand that it's if they're properly coached, that this is a tool and a guide to give you greater understanding and help you work in your strengths.
Okay, so let's build upon that a little bit more. So, as we went through this, right? So, is there a risk to knowing your why can lock you into a single path, preventing you from exploring new opportunities or pivoting when necessary? So does the why lock you in?
No, I definitely would not agree with that statement. I would say, if anything, the why would possibly prevent you from going down a path that's going to cause you a whole lot of frustration and possibly put you in an environment where you perceive yourself failing or not succeeding, because you're going to go and do something in an avenue where if you've got a why of mastery and you go and work in an organization where you're going to be moved from pillar to post every 3 or 6 months and never have the opportunity to master one area of the business or one division, then you're going to always feel like you haven't quite achieved what you would like to achieve if your why is
Mhm.
mastery. So, Andrew, you and I are a better way. So, very different for us. We'd go from place to place. We'd be charged by that, and we'd be energized because we'd walk into every environment and say, okay, like, how can we do this a better way? Irritate everybody around us, quite possibly. But I mean, that would feed us.
Yeah.
So I think, as opposed to saying, okay, Andrew, Luke, you're going to sit here and work in this department until you're an absolute professional and a pro at doing it. You and I mean, I speak for myself. That is definitely not something I'd like to do. So I think straight away, when you understand, okay, like, this is where I like to work, is be in an environment where I can make an improvement to an existing system, that would be amazing. So it would stop you doing that. If I was told, okay, we've brought in a consulting firm, they've designed the system for us, we're going to implement the system, and nothing on the system is going to change for the next 5 years. Luke, would you like to go and work in that environment? I wouldn't, because I want to be part of something where I can improve things. So if I'm told I cannot make any changes, then it's not for me. So I think it's a great preventative tool to ask yourself the question, okay, how is my why being fulfilled, being put to use? How am I growing? And what opportunity do I have to feel like I'm adding value? So I
Yeah.
don't think it would pigeonhole you, because you can take a better way, a trust, a mastery, a right way, and put them in any environment. A right way can work in law, they can work in manufacturing, they can work in any environment, Andrew. So I think it would guide you away from making mistakes rather than pigeonhole you.
Awesome. Fantastic. So, all right. So let's follow up on this. I'm gonna keep digging on you here and reading some great answers. Um, how can we balance staying true to our why while being adaptable to the changing environment or circumstances?
I think that's relatively easy to answer. I think, when you know what your why is, you're going to look at circumstances that are possibly out of your control and decide, how to deal with that environment in the moment. So,
Hmm.
if it's something you have absolutely no control over, you're going to understand your frustration at that and be able to then court a plan or a path forward to say, okay, well, I'm going to endure this for the next 3 6 months, and then I'm going to pivot. So I think it would help you rather than impede you.
All right, awesome. So let's keep moving. So I think really what I'm getting from that is understanding your why is not an impediment. It's actually an enabler. There doesn't seem to be in our minds risks, right? It's you don't get locked into things, you don't get tied up. It's not one of those navel gazers. It actually enlightens and it enables you to select in the right way. So I think there's a lot more positives than any negatives, and I don't know if you agree, but I don't think we've seen any negatives to it so far.
No, I agree 100%, Andrew. I haven't seen any. I think, I've come across it in one or two instances with corporates where you'll find someone discover their why and then look at the career path they've chosen, and the lights come on, and and there's perturbation. Let's say, well, now I understand my frustration, but I'm 10 or 15 years down the road. And
Yeah.
do I now want to change, or, can I manipulate my why? Well, I don't believe that you can manipulate your why. That's you can take the tool again in another 6 or 12 months if you want to. And I'd be interested to see, and Dr. Sanchez could maybe enlighten us there if people have done that and there have been radical changes. But I'm inclined to believe that there wouldn't be. So I think that's the only time where I could look at it and say, okay, well, maybe it hasn't been 100% positive for the individual because now they have that worry. But from a coaching perspective, I would say, that's enlightenment, because now suddenly you understand why maybe you've been unhappy for the last decade or for 1.5 or 2 decades, because you're doing the wrong thing and you're not fulfilled.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's get into when and how to use our why. So, deep reflection and necessary action most frequently must be balanced and can often feel like walking a tightrope. But is it feasible to balance these so that our purpose supports rather than interferes with our choices? So my first question to you on this topic is, what strategies do you employ to balance the exploration of why with the need for immediate action?
I suppose the only thing that I'd look at in my specific instance, Andrew, as a better way, clarify, simplify, is sometimes, there are situations that I believe there might be a better way to do it. But, that's an egotistical, possibly arrogant view of someone who thinks they'll always find a better way. So I think what I do is I'll put it through a matrix and say, okay, well, is it urgent? Do I actually need to find a better way to achieve this outcome? Or is it actually more valuable just to get the ball over the line? And and that's probably my biggest test, is to say, okay, well, honestly, as a team player in this environment, or even in my business environment, the most important thing for me is to get it done. I can spend next year or next month deciding if there's a better way to achieve that outcome. But at the moment, that doesn't warrant the time spent. What's valuable is getting it done. So I think for me, that's the biggest thing. And I imagine that might be the case for someone with the why of mastery, is to say, okay, do I need to actually master this right now and be the best in the world at it? Or do I actually just need to get the task complete? So I think sometimes it's a case of, what did we call it, sitting on your hands. And I think that could be for many of the whys, sometimes just sit on your hands. You don't need to challenge it. You don't need to master it, and you don't need to find a better way just yet. Get it done.
Yeah. So when we do the why discoveries, not only do we find your unique brilliance, right? Your why do you do what you do and how do you do it, but we also look at what are the opportunities, right? So what are the opportunities for you, and we give you the antidote for that as well, correct?
Definitely.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, so let's dig a little deeper into this. So, what methods or tools can organizations implement to ensure their alignment of action and purpose?
I think in that space, the most critical thing is, if you're looking at alignment on purpose or whatever you're doing in your organization, is making sure that you've got buy-in from your team. So have you got square pegs in round holes? Have you got the right people in the right seats? That's my first question to any team leader, if or an executive. If that's what you're chasing, how are you getting it done? So if you're looking for that alignment, how are you getting the alignment? And what do you need in your team? So I think very often, Andrew, and that's, I'm sure you've come across it, you've got executives, you look at their team, you analyze the team with them, and they've got no simplify, or they haven't got anyone a right way of doing things. So they've got a whole lot. They've got this mix mash of people that have been pulled up through an organization because of years of service, or whatever it might be, a previous CEO or MD that put that person in that role that just isn't the right person for that role. And I think that's the critical thing. So as an executive, I would say you'd have to put your team through a WHY.os and then through DISC, and to know that you've got the right people in the right place. What is the key role? What are the objectives and key results for that role? And is this the right person in the right DISC to achieve that outcome?
Yeah, I mean, having those tools at your disposal, being able to understand that at the deepest level, um, and to your point, do you have the right people in the right seat on the right bus, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Critical.
awesome. Yeah. All right. So next question on this: how do you recalibrate your why when facing challenges in life, circumstances, and how does this impact your action and decisions?
I'm not convinced you can recalibrate your why. I think
Mm-hmm.
you can. I think you can look at it and say, okay, how important or how much do I need to stay in that space or in that lane at the moment, given what I'm dealing with. I can only use myself as an example in that space.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said in the previous one, do I need a better way right now, or maybe my what, which is simplify what I bring. Do I need to rather be in a simplify space and
Mm-hmm.
just simplify things in order to get over this hurdle? So I think I suppose it's a calibration, whether it's a slight deviation. Yeah, I think understanding your why, your how, and your what, and even
Mm-hmm.
understanding the 9 whys will give you that leniency to move around. Possibly, if you're in a team environment, who's the best team person with the best why, maybe to guide the team in that space at that moment. In a relationship, is your spouse, your partner, is their why maybe more conducive to giving you as a team better guidance? And sometimes you need to maybe step out of just me and, use the services of a coach and say, okay, I need a bit of, here, I've got an obstacle. What are my options? Let's explore them and let's talk them through. So I think in that space, yeah, you could step out of yourself and get some assistance.
Okay. Awesome. What would
Can't think of any reason you'd reevaluate your why off the top of my head, Andrew. I think I think that's intrinsic. If it's in you, unless you're convinced that when you took the tool assessment, that maybe you were in a bad emotional space, you were not focused, you might retake it. But I think if you're finding yourself in an environment where you're thinking, okay, well, maybe I need to reevaluate my why, then I would look at the tool and I would go into the WHY.os or contact us at 4Leaf and speak to a certified practitioner and a coach and go through that and share your views on why you would reevaluate your why. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there might be times when you'd love to have a why of mastery. I know there are times when I'd love to have a why of mastery, Andrew. But it's just not in me. As much as I would like to have that as a why, I don't have it. It's just not there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
no, I think you might be wishful, but I'd have to say I'd love to hear Dr. Gary Sanchez's input on that, but I don't know how you do that.
Yeah. To your point, I mean, I had somebody that was questioning it the other day, and it wasn't their why that was the problem; it was the environment, right? It was back to your comments earlier. It was more around what they were doing, the environment that was going on. There was big changes that were going on, and it wasn't about their why. It was about where they fitted in, and they were trying to fit their why into where they were being positioned. And unfortunately, the position was not the right position for that person. So when we sat down, like as you said, they picked up the phone, gave me a call, we had a conversation, and it wasn't about their why. Their why was still their why. It was the environment, the position, what was going on was challenging to them, and it wasn't a good fit.
Yeah.
and they were trying to your analogy, we were trying to put a round peg in a square hole, right? And it wasn't fitting. And they went, well, is it because no, it's not. You're trying to put a round peg in a square hole.
Exactly, Andrew. And I think that so often happens in corporations and big business, doesn't it? You take your
Yeah,
top salesperson and you make him a sales manager. You know, I mean, and I mean, so often you basically set that individual up for failure because
yeah,
that's not their driver, and they're now in an environment where the metrics that they're measured on are totally different, and it doesn't suit the personality or necessarily the why. So
yeah,
I think that's the error, and I think so often in corporates, from what I've seen globally, is that some of those appointments are rushed. I think the initial recruitment process is often very good. And I think once that person now comes into the organization and they've been well recruited, they're in the
mm-hmm.
right role at recruitment level. And then when the growth happens and they get moved around because it's perceived that they're brilliant, but they're brilliant because they're in the right space and you got your recruitment right. But now you take them out of that role and move them into a more senior position with different metrics or measurements or a different environment to work within, and they're not successful, and everyone's like, well, I don't know what's happened. He's disengaged. He's not necessarily disengaged. He's just totally out of his zone of high performance.
Yeah, exactly. So it appears that the findings of harmony between our inner purpose and constantly changing world around us is key, right? As we draw this conversation to a close, let's wrap up and examine the lessons that we've learned today. So we've discussed the profound effect of knowing your why, how it builds on a greater emotional fortitude, um, and how it broadens our views and success throughout the conversation. It's also obvious that it's a fine line to be drawn between the order to achieve balance, while our why gives us that internal motivation direction, particularly during difficult times. We must watch for overthinking traps. But as Luke said, we've never seen that. We actually want people to think more, right? We want to make sure that we do spend some time thinking, doing some introspective, right? Uh, but also making sure that that doesn't lead us into isolation. The dynamic relationship between motivation and action is made even more apparent with our need to adapt to our purpose, along with the dynamics of the changing personal and cultural ideals. We couldn't have got through this difficult topic without your advice, Luke, so we appreciate you. To everybody watching, while considering your own whys, bear in mind the value of striking a balance between reflection and action, as well as the importance of evolving to keep up with changing circumstances. So stay smart and proactive. Until then, have a great day.
Cheerio. Thanks very much, Andrew. Thoroughly enjoyed that.
Thank you, Luke.